Hello, everyone. A special episode of Terminal City FC podcast. Josh Ray joined alongside Nathan Dirk as per usual. Felipe Vallejo of AFT and Northern Tribune is here with us. This is a quick one because I did not expect this. You did not expect this. This is a shock to everyone this morning. I opened my email. I couldn't believe what I was reading. But the Vancouver Whitecaps have parted ways with head coach Vanni Sartini. And as a new search for a new head coach will begin, there will be a press conference with Axel Schuster this afternoon around 1:30. We'll all be there at UBC. So my first reaction is this is shocking. I did not expect this. I don't know about you guys.
You know what? The interesting thing is my initial reaction was shock. But now that I go back to the end of season presser, I go back to the comments at the end of the very last LAFC game. And I look at some of those comments from Vanni in a little bit of a different light now, as if it was almost not a plea, but a little bit of him trying to fight a little bit for his job.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing for me. Like, obviously, shock was the first one. The fact that he was being let go today of all days, like so quickly after the end of the season. And then afterwards, it kind of like I had two thoughts that were predominantly in my head. The first one is this is a big gamble from the Whitecaps.
Yep.
This is a big gamble from the Whitecaps because you are letting go of essentially the most successful MLS coach in your history.
Yep.
Since going into the MLS, 3 Canadian championships, the Cascadia Cups, going and winning playoff games. It's a big move from the Whitecaps to do this. And so for me, and I think for a lot of fans that see this news, they're thinking, okay, if you're going to do this big gamble, you must have a plan in place to replace him. You must either have some names or a name already lined up to be able to replace him because, again, this is huge because not only was he a successful MLS coach in terms of the results and everything across the last 3 years, but he's also, like, we all know how charismatic he is. He's also an extremely popular figure, not only in Vancouver and the Vancouver soccer scene, but in MLS. How many of his quotes went viral across MLS, in the last 2 years, especially in the last 2 years, where it was very Messi dominated. To get into the headlines at all was a big feat for anybody. Vanni went viral multiple times for some of the things, for good reasons, not good reasons, but nevertheless, it put Vancouver on the map in that way as well. So, like, they really need someone, a successor that's able to do both, the stuff on the field, but also off the field to make sure that Vancouver, the Whitecaps stay relevant. And then the second thing I thought is how long has the writing been on the wall there? Because like you mentioned, the final comments that he made after the LAFC game, and even some of the things that he talked about at the end of season presser, It makes it seem now like, yeah, he was kind of maybe fighting for it. So maybe he thought that at the very least that this was a conversation that was like, hey, you might actually have to go for us to move on. And so I wondered, like, because of how quickly after the season ended this decision was made, how long have the people involved known that this was going to be the outcome?
There's a lot of things within that. There's the whole idea of his comments where he was talking about maybe they need a new head coach, but that's a question for the club and not the coach. There was the fact that he was talking about that he wants to stay here, right? He doesn't want to go look for another job. So he's fighting for that as well. And something to what you said, Felipe, as well, is how long has this been a discussion within the Whitecaps organization? And I have to think with how pragmatic Axel Schuster has been in terms of player signings, how long they've kind of known their guy, and they don't waver from that, and they'll take their time. I have to feel like this is already been a process in place for a couple of months.
I think this was a long, tough decision, as I bring up the press release here. Axel Schuster says, I took my time with the decision. It was not taken lightly and all that. And like what Felipe said, this is a gamble because Vanni Sartini is the best coach of the MLS Cup era. And I think there has to be some sort of plan in place for an upgrade on Vanni. And I would think a coach that's well experienced at the top flight level has to be in the running for the upcoming vacancy. And of course, a name that comes to mind is the former Philadelphia Union head coach, Jim Curtin, who just got fired a few weeks ago. And the guy has experience with the Union, a Moneyball club, took them to an MLS Cup final. And that would be, I would assume, a name high on the list. And I'm not sure if there are any others, but
somebody, I don't know if jokingly or not, but somebody threw Tata Martino out.
Yeah,
and I was like, I don't know about that one.
Throw that right back out.
Yeah,
That's not happening.
3 names that I thought were practical. One is Jim Curtin. Jim Curtin also has a bit of a Vancouver connection because way back during his playing career, when the Whitecaps actually, when they were kind of looking to join MLS, they kind of hosted like an open, almost like a combine for players. And Curtin's one of the guys that actually showed up to that, spent some time in Vancouver and actually, tried to fight for a spot as a playing career. That's here, there, anywhere. But, he knows the city. We know that he actually thought about making the city his home at one point. We'll have to wait and see. Gonzalo Pineda, formerly of Atlanta. This guy looking for a job, and another guy looking for a job and knows the kind of like the Pacific Northwest of the States. He's been out of a job for a while. Savarese.
Yeah, he's mostly been on MLS season passes or special guest or whatever. He would be an interesting name.
But formerly of Portland.
That's the thing.
Another guy who knows how to work with a budget a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
I think Curtin.
Not to say the Whitecaps, aren't spending money. I think they're now top 12 in terms of players.
Yeah, that was mainly due to Stuart Armstrong.
Yeah, well, when you're only playing with 2 DPs in a 3 DP league, that's gonna happen. But the other thing I look at with this is, in a weird way, and I know that Axel Schuster did hire on a permanent basis Vanni Sartini after Mark DeSantos left, but this feels like the first time where this is Schuster's chance to bring in his coach. Yes. Vanni Sartini was brought in on an interim basis and went on a run that kind of was unheard of. Got them from kind of the doldrums of the Western Conference in 2021 to making the playoffs in the final game of the regular season. So you can't tell him he doesn't have the job at that point. This feels like the first time where Schuster gets to pick his coach. And I do wonder how much of his German connections play into that.
That's what I was wondering as well.
Yeah, exactly, because he has a lot of German connections too from his time in Schalke and stuff like that. So maybe we get in Mainz, maybe we get an international coach from Germany to come to Vancouver and to be able to, have a lasting impact, as you pull up Vanni's statement there at the end.
The last 3 years, 3 months, been an absolute honor. And the thing is, it's not just 3 years, 3 months. He's been with this club for about 6 years. 2019, I think, at the very beginning of the 2019 season is when he was brought in as an assistant. Ended up moving to be head coach of the second team, director of methodology, before taking over the head coaching job.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's a massive loss, I think, for everybody. I know that there were some doubters and some people that weren't the biggest fan of him, his outspokenness, his tactics, his philosophy there. But like for the most part, I'd say majority of the fan base and even like the media and everybody around the league really loved Vanni because he was sort of like, I know there's always a joke, but he was sort of like the Ted Lasso of like the real life Ted Lasso of MLS. Just very outspoken, very friendly, candid. Even when he messed up and he said some things he shouldn't have, he still kind of rolled with it, much to the panic of the PR team. But like that's the thing, is the presence that he had in Vancouver, and the fact that he was such like a working class man allowed fans to endear themselves to him. So yeah, he'll be very, very sorely missed.
You might find, and you can absolutely, there are better coaches out there. It's going to be very difficult to find another person that understands the relationship between club and everyone else outside of the club, whether it's fans, media, you name it. I remember at the beginning of this past season when they hosted the round table And Vanni was actually talking to us, and they did a whole afternoon of, here's what our plan is, here's our tactics, here's what we're looking at, and basically just allowed us as media to inundate him with questions for as long as we could go until we exhausted ourselves. I remember sitting beside JJ Adams from the province and Post Media, and he kind of looked at me and just said, "This doesn't happen." It's like, I have never in all my years of talking with coaches and anyone in a front office of any sport, of any team, this doesn't happen.
That's just the thing with Van. He just loves to talk about tactics, not just football, but anything, whether that's his socialistic ideals, his atheism ideas, why he hates Batman. I think that's the part of Vanny that we're all gonna miss. Because us off record, we talked with him many times and stuff that obviously can't be said here. We're gonna all miss all that, but I mean, he brought exciting football with his tactics, but I would say that this is the club's message is, okay, thanks for bringing us this far, but we need someone to take us even further, and we're going to shoot for the stars.
And that's what it feels like. It feels like we've gone through your tenure, but we don't know if you're the guy to go to that next step. Because, I mean, for as much as we love the man, there were times where what we saw was frustrating.
No,
especially
we saw a rigidity to the system where sometimes understanding that changes need to be made, but then actually making them didn't happen because you're stuck in your ways. We also know that, I mean, in terms of being a head coach, Vanny's a very young head coach. This is his first head coaching job.
At a top level,
right?
Yeah.
At a top level. Yeah. He's done other positions. He's been the coach of coaches. He's worked with youth. He's worked with federations at a club level. This was new to him. So, I mean, club and coach were learning at the same time a little bit. Does this, and I throw this out to both of you, is this the Vancouver Whitecaps as a club trying to be more mature, of saying, okay, thank you for what you've done, but we need to look at what's the next step, because you might not be the guy to grow with us, or we don't want to be that guy or we don't want to be that club that's just growing. We want to be the club that's now achieving.
Yeah. I think, it proves that it's like a maturity. It's also ambitious. And to be fair, I mean, like, if we try to take the emotion out of it and the shock of it, you look at the decision in and of itself, and it's something that the fans have been crying out for a while. It's always a thing of like, oh, the Whitecaps are never ambitious. They never, really put their full cards on the table kind of thing and like take a big swing, whether it's because of DP signings or coaches or whatever. That's always been the running sort of gag around the Whitecaps, is that they're willing to compete, but they're never willing to gamble or take the risk for that next big step. It looks like this is the first time where we're like, this is the next big step gamble.
And it is a gamble. It is a gamble, absolutely. And I think anytime you're wanting to achieve something at the highest level, there is that inherent risk that's involved. And I don't think that's lost on anyone.
No, I mean, and I think if you look at it, you see like when the Whitecaps were at their peak, especially this season, they were easily a top 4 side in MLS, but they weren't able to do that consistently, whether it's because of injuries, whether it's because of schedule, international. Also, I think it's I'll have to do also with the system and how demanding it is because of how idealistic the system is in and of itself. In theory, whatever the case is, I think maybe they kind of felt like, because they weren't able to take that next step with him, that they reached a sort of ceiling under him, and they wanted to break that ceiling. And despite the very, amazing history that they've been able to build with him in the last 3 years, it looks like for once the Whitecaps have really like set the stage and said, no, this is our ambitions. We want to compete for an MLS Cup. We want to do it our way, but we want to get there. And, Unfortunately for Vanni, he wasn't the guy, so let's go and find that guy.
You said wanting to compete for an MLS Cup, and I'm wondering right now is how much of this plays into the fact that next year is kind of the last year with a lot of these guys. You take a look at all the players that are on club options right now, of which there are quite a few. A lot of those options are only for 1 year left. I think Priso is the only one I can think of right now that has the option of 2 years going forward out of all the ones that have it. You got to think that if coach is coming in right now, it's to look at this next year as the year, because after this, there's going to be a bit of a rebuild. You're going to see players leave at the end of next season. There's going to be a shaking.
Next season is the all-in year, and I think this coaching change is a sign of let's go all in. Let's go all in guns blazing, because we won't have a better opportunity than next year. And I mean, the Whitecaps, like, people who don't know the Whitecaps, they're too cheap, they don't spend, they're not ambitious. I think this really shows times are changing around the Whitecaps, especially the culture Axel Schuster has brought in. And we'll wrap it up here by just saying thank you to Vanni Sartini. He was on this show not too long ago. Thank you for making us laugh. Thank you for giving us the greatest quotes we'll ever hear from any coach. I don't know if your successor will live up to that, but thank you for everything. Thanks for the Canadian Championships, for interacting with the fans. But all good things come to an end, and Vanni Sartini's reign as the Whitecaps head coach is over. Press conference with Axel Schuster later today, 1:30. I don't know if they'll broadcast it. I kind of doubt they will. But I'll try to tweet as many things he says as possible, as will these guys. So thanks for tuning in. Cheers.
Thank you.
Grazie.